This week on Aristea 99, we're talking about Eclipse. Let's get started into her stats. She has an initiative of 5, a movement of 5, energy of 5, and health of 3. She's a little squishy, not too badly so, but certainly she's not someone you necessarily want to keep in a vulnerable position. You will add to that fact that her defense is a blue and a black. So not really the greatest right there. I mean, the black's a 50-50 chance of getting a shield. The blue's a little bit better than that, but it's no green, let's be honest. If you look at her brawl, she has a blue and a yellow, so a little bit better than average. Likewise, her disengage is an orange and a yellow. Now, what's actually interesting to mention about these is neither one of them plays directly into her switch. Her character switch being 1 success, and you can impose the marked state on the target. So it's not as if she had 2 oranges, or she had, say, a blue and an orange or something like that. So good, a little good, better chance of getting it, but it doesn't really heavily favor getting her switch. Still, that's pretty nice. If we look at her abilities, we're going to start off with her attack, Black Lightning. There's an orange, and a yellow, and it's range 2 to 5. Like many ranged characters, she does not want anyone right next to her. Kind of a short range, to be perfectly honest, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Unlike many ranged attacks, however, say for Wild Bill or Hannibal or something like that, the switch here is 2 bangs, and you get to impose the dazzled state on the target. Now, that's actually pretty good. So you have an attack that has a pretty good chance of succeeding, and has a chance of getting a very desirable switch, I would say, especially attacking at a distance. An enemy who is dazzled can't return damage against a ranged attack. Works very nicely, and of course, if you can happen to get marked on them, then again with 2 oranges, that's not too hard. That plays into what the rest of your team can do. So in and of itself, it's a nice attack, but when you take the 2 switches into consideration, I'm surprised it's only 2 points. I'll be perfectly honest. I would almost say it's worth 3. Personal opinion, don't listen to Corvus Belli, leave it at 2. Next up, we have Moon Cycle. This is a blue and a yellow. It's range 1 through 4. She can't use this on herself. This does require line of sight. And you get a success, well, you can flip a state token on the target. So you do have to have a target for this, obviously. But for 2 bangs, you can actually flip a state token on a target within range 1 to 4. Line of sight required. Now this means that should you be able to get a success and the switch, what you would actually be able to do then is you would be able to clear 2 states off the same target. In the unlikely, actually I don't think you could get a 3rd one going unless you added a tactics card for an additional yellow or an additional die overall. That is pretty darn nice. So we've used this quite often, whether it's to refresh a buff. So say you have Hippolyta handing out the +2 initiative, or say, oh look, we've got something here that you like, that you want on there. You can flip it back over, keep it going. Conversely, what you can also do is flip over a state token that's on its blue side and put it back on its red side for immobilized, for dazzled, for stunned, for any number of negative effects. Additionally, and this is actually where Eclipse changed the rules. When you got Human Fates, there was a card saying, hey, by the way, there's a new rule for Poison. Poison has a new rule. We changed it. So instead of it flipping over, doing damage but not going away, leaving the blue side up, it would be, Poison would flip over to the blue side, do the damage, and be immediately taken away. The reason for that is Eclipse, because otherwise you'd be able to, I'm going to flip the Poison, flip it again, flip it again, flip it again, just keep on doing damage that way. It kind of breaks things. Same thing with burning, obviously. So, that being said, you can then take something that would be a delayed effect, which would be Poison, which would be burning, flip them over from the red to the blue side immediately, and therefore cause that damage to start going off. So it kind of takes the delayed gratification out of that part of it, but it does come at an opportunity cost. You have to spend the energy, you have to put Eclipse at risk, because it's range 1 to 4. If you happen to have Sterling Forge, you could get that to 1 to 5, but it's still not a huge difference there. Major Luna, holographic sights, get it up to maybe 1 to 6. That's kind of safe. Next up, we're going to talk about Penumbra. That is her passive ability. So at the end of your activation, impose the hidden state on an adjacent ally. Now, hidden, we talked about with Dart, is a fantastic state to have for your characters. It can be very beneficial. And the ability to give it to someone who wouldn't normally have that is actually pretty nice. So imagine, say, you've got, I don't know, Maximus. We're going to go right up to Maximus, we're going to put Hidden on him, and then all of a sudden all the ranged adversaries he would have can't necessarily try shooting at him or doing long distance things at him. That's kind of nice for Maximus. It lets him get where he's going, and he doesn't necessarily have to worry about being slowed by suppressive fire in Major Luna. He can, since he's not being attacked, well, you know what's going to happen is he gets to keep more of his hit points for intercepting damage for friendly characters. Putting this on Gata, so ranged characters can't intercept her with their threat range, is obviously a wonderful thing. Putting this on Musashi makes him that much scarier. You kind of get the picture here. Also, though, if you're playing Human Fate and you happen to have Dart on your team, at the beginning of the first round of the game, Eclipse ending her turn right next to Dart before she's even gone would actually let Dart be hidden from the get-go. I don't know necessarily if you would want to do that. It would depend on the scenario, it would depend on the situation, the matchup and such, but it is an option. And you know me, I like options. So we're going to go on to tactics. First off, we're going to talk about polarization. At the beginning of the action step of one of your character's activations, flip as many state tokens as you want on one target. This is a great card. This is a great tactic. If someone is thoroughly debuffed, which does happen, you go ahead and you just flip them all over, and they're not under the effect of it anymore. They'll still have the state tokens, so you clear them off at the end of the round, but still you're looking pretty good there. That's on the buffing side. That's your team-friendly side. On the offensive side, just like Moon Cycle, if someone is loaded up with a bunch of toxin, poison tokens, or if they're loaded up with a bunch of fire tokens, or if they've got really nice buffs, you can flip all of those over. But here's the thing, it says as many state tokens as you want. So say if they've got the -2 energy on them for whatever reason, you can just leave that there. If they've got negative movement, -2, you just leave it there. you just put all the ones you want to keep. Well, you can keep them on longer. If they got something good on them, make it go away faster. And if you got something that would basically be instant damage to them, you flip, you flip, you flip. This is a very versatile tactics card. I would even say it's one of those that, personally I would say, if it's being used wisely, is almost is probably a noteworthy card. Great card, and it is a very team-friendly card because it doesn't have to be on Eclipse's turn. After that, we have Luxumbra. During the active action step of your character's activations, displace a hidden or marked target. So, as we've seen, Eclipse hands out both of these conditions. There are other characters that can mark. Right now, Dart can be hidden. So this is kind of nice, and that gives you a way to affect both of them. It's especially nice because normally a hidden character you wouldn't be able to affect because you can't have line of sight on them. So whether it's repositioning them for better or worse, or just getting them out of trouble, whatever, this is great. And they don't have to be on your team. So certainly if the opposing player has a dart, you can put them right next to someone who's going to be hard to get away from. Likewise, putting them a marked target right next to a melee character. If you could get them right next to, say, Mutare, for instance, that's fantastic. Mutare will eat them up happily. There's some definite potential here, or just as simple as getting someone in range for one of your character's buffs or attacks or something like that. There's the ability to displace, and in this fashion, someone who's marked, which is the kind of but about this card. They do have to be marked or hidden, but the ability to do that and not have a range on it, so you could be clear across the board and still influence their movement, is fairly powerful. If you've got a way to hand those conditions out, or you're planning to hand those out, this is a great card. You'll probably want to look at the rest of your team composition to see if this kind of fits in, or if you're going to be overloading Eclipse with this. Again, Eclipse doesn't have the greatest defense, not the most health, so you don't necessarily want her being the only source, not necessarily of the hidden, but of the marked. So even if you have Dart and you have Prism on your team, for instance, well, this is basically saying, hey, I'm going to move Prism and I'm going to move Dart. That right there makes the card, I think, very much worth considering. Speaking of marked, next up is Bailey's Bead. During the action step of one of your character's activations, impose the marked state on a target. This is, obviously, the simplest use of this is going to be, hey, I'm going to play marked on this enemy, and now everyone's going to have a chance to attack them. Perfect use of the card. Very easy use of the card. But what if you want to do something a little weirder? So, for instance, say you've got a character who is, for one reason or another, out of line of sight, and it's one of your characters. Putting marked on them basically means that, okay, you don't require line of sight. It's like, why am I going to do that? Well, maybe they are behind a wall. Maybe there's smoke in the way. Maybe one of your other characters is dazzled. So imagine, for instance, Eclipse is dazzled and she needs to get the state off of someone, but maybe she's immobilized, she can't move, or they're right around the corner, she doesn't have enough movement to get around. There's any number of things. If there's no enemies who can directly threaten that character in range, and that's the key, they're in range, you could impose marked on them, flip the states, and then flip marked over so it deactivates. You could do that. You could use the marked to use Luxumbra to move them as well. Likewise, if, say, Pavarti needs to heal someone and Pavarti is dazzled, or again, there's something in the way, there's smoke, there's people in the way, you just go ahead, before Pavarti goes, you go ahead, mark them, then she can do the healing, and then she can clear the state. There's a lot of interesting things you could potentially do with that. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's offensive. If you really wanted to be weird, you could taunt a friend with Senator Massacre. It's like, hey, you're taunted. And hey, because you're marked and taunted, I can teleport right to you. Why not? There's some interesting things you can do with it as a result. So don't think of this purely as an offensive card. But if you're going to be using it in a way that you're marking one of your own team, you do need to be aware of the situation. Because if you don't have a way to clear off the marked status, they will be vulnerable until it goes away. It could be worth the risk, but again, keep this in mind. And at the very least, keep in mind as well, everybody has contender. 1 to 8, and when you look at the extra cards that are out now, when you look at Sterling Forge particularly, contender becomes a little more potent than it would normally be. So you roll the orange, you roll the extra die, and you get to re-roll a die. Oh, fantastic. So you do want to be mindful of that. Don't be totally paranoid. It still has to be worthwhile for your opponent, but do keep it in mind. Last up, we have Veil of Darkness. One of the things I love about Eclipse actually is all of her tactics can be used by anyone in her team. This is wonderful. It's a very generous character tactics-wise. So, and this is a fun one. During the action step of one of your character's activations, impose the hidden states to a target. This is the fun thing with hidden. When someone's hidden, neither their enemies nor their allies can target them. So, while normally you would think of, okay, imposing hidden would be something you do to one of your friends, one of your teammates, to help them get around and all that sort of thing, which is great, don't get me wrong, that is a wonderful use of it. Thinking a little creatively, what if you had an enemy who was badly damaged, had a lot of states on them, things like that? What if you could make it so their allies couldn't draw a line of sight on them, and if they don't have line of sight of them, well, they might not be able to heal them, they might not be able to get rid of those states, they might not be able to do any number of things. So when you look at the abilities they have, if it's a black range, meaning it requires line of sight, then they would not be able to use those on the target. So you can effectively use this, so far as I know, as a way of denying characters. What you're effectively doing is turning a buff into a debuff. You're hindering their ability to get assistance, to get help. Now, you do have to keep in mind that some abilities don't necessarily care. Hippolyta, for instance, when she's going around inspiring everybody with those great speeches of hers, that's a range 0 to 3, I think it was, but no line of sight required. It would not be affected by Veil of Darkness. So that's Eclipse. Again, like the other Human Fate characters, there's definitely more to her than what you initially would read and initially would think. Certainly it took me quite some time to kind of get an idea of how I wanted to use her, how I wanted to play with her. The ability to use her tactic cards creatively, I think, is probably the biggest challenge you might have. Her personal character card, pretty straightforward, pretty nice, to be honest. But I think it's really the tactic cards that make her. And there we go. Next up, we're going to be talking about Prism, and we'll see you then. Like, comment, and subscribe. Questions down below, please.